As the nation tracks the election, we continue to track Eta, a tropical storm expected to head in our direction with the potential to hit Florida within the week. Our meteorologists are live to break down where things stand with Eta right now and where things are headed here on Tracking the Tropics. Hey there, everybody. JB Buno here with you live once again in your hurricane headquarters. We want to really express a lot of uncertainty surrounding Eta, but thank goodness we have the meteorologists here to break it down, including our own meteorologist, Julie Phillips, here live with us in our hurricane headquarters. We're also going to be getting to Ian Oliver here momentarily for the very latest on Eta, and a very interesting track. As uncertain as it is, a very interesting track here, especially for Floridians. We want to remind you folks that we're going to be taking some of your questions here in a meteorologist Q&A using the hashtags on your screen. You can use hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJulie, and hashtag HeyIan for meteorologist Ian Oliver standing by for the very latest on Eta. Hey there, Ian.
JB, good afternoon. You said it as if there's nothing else of any consequence going on this week that we need to watch. We do have one other thing, and that is Tropical Storm Eta. Just something to watch for folks watching us right now from Florida. That's all it is at this point. You mentioned the uncertainty, JB. We'll talk about why there is more than normal uncertainty with the eventual track and intensity of this system. But this is where it stands right now. Now Tropical Storm Eta, and unfortunately this made landfall as a devastating Category 4 hurricane in Nicaragua yesterday with maximum sustained winds of around 140 miles per hour. Its motion is to the west at 7 miles per hour, crossing the border now from Nicaragua on into Honduras. There's a lot of high terrain here, and that's really ripping up that center of circulation associated with Tropical Storm Eta. That's helping to quickly weaken the system, and it may not even be at tropical storm intensity anymore, or it may not be for much longer. Still a little bit unclear with that right now as far as the intensity of the system. You can see that's the center right there, and there really isn't even any convection near the center of this system, and that has a lot to do with the land interaction and also the high terrain acting to weaken this system quickly. So it's going to be moving slowly to the west right now. I mentioned 7 miles per hour, still producing what could be life-threatening flooding across portions of Central America. The slow motion of this system is very problematic for these nations as that tropical rainfall continues. This is the forecast track, the latest one from the National Hurricane Center, and this is where the uncertainty comes into the forecast. As this system weakens and becomes more of a general broad area of low pressure, it is expected at some point, likely on Friday, to reemerge back into the northwestern Caribbean. And it's at that point where conditions start getting more favorable for redevelopment of this system. But the question, as it becomes a broad area of low pressure, where exactly does that center of circulation redevelop? How quickly does it do so? And where does it go from there? So once forecast models can key in on an exact point somewhere in this general area, that's where we'll start being able to dial in the eventual forecast track of the system. This is the 5-day forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center, and you notice now it does include South Florida. It actually does include the southern part of the Tampa Bay area, but this is a very broad area, and we're seeing still a wide variety in solutions from each forecast model and then run to run, even the same forecast models kind of waffling as far as what they expect to happen with the system. So you can see in the short term, the system passing over Central America. It emerges here, but you see kind of just that hodgepodge. It's a mess in the northwestern Caribbean. We need to get a point here of where exactly the system's going to be. Then we can see where it's going to move and how quickly it's going to intensify at that point. General trends, though, take it back into the northwestern Caribbean, up towards Cuba, perhaps as a tropical system once again, likely maybe a middle-of-the-road tropical storm. Then we have to consider some land interaction with Cuba. Then it reemerges into the Florida Straits and could impact South Florida with perhaps tropical storm conditions. Could be rain with a name. We're going to have to see how this thing evolves. This is a probability of tropical storm force winds 40 miles per hour or in excess of that. And you see we're still at just low probabilities for South Florida at this point. So we really need to watch this system and see when forecast models come into better agreement, when they have a better understanding of the evolution of this system. This is just one forecast model. It's the GFS. The trends that I mentioned, moves into the northwestern Caribbean, wobbles up towards Cuba, moves over the island, and then moves towards either the Bahamas, South Florida. There are solutions that take this north and west as a stronger system, eastern part of the Gulf, perhaps up towards the Panhandle eventually. Some weaker solutions that maybe make a landfall in South Florida and move up the peninsula as a big rainmaker, or perhaps even on the eastern side of the peninsula in the Atlantic. So that's what we're going to have to dial in over the next several days. One thing to be certain of, likely as we head towards the next several days, would be late weekend, the early part of next week, as the system has slowed down a little bit. The trends, at least, would be the possibility for some big rainfall tallies, especially across South Florida, perhaps areas farther up to the north from there. So this is where we're at now. Of course, this has been a big-time active season. Just in the Greek alphabet, we've had 3 major hurricanes now in Delta, Epsilon, and Eta. 5 major hurricanes in total, 12 hurricanes, and 28 named storms. So this is as far as we've been in recorded history into this Greek alphabet. We're in November. This is, at least on the calendar, climatologically, the last month of the hurricane season. We'll hope things start to settle down, but we're going to have to watch Eta pretty closely over the next several days.
Leave it,
Julie?
Yeah, Ian, leave it to 2020 to give us something unprecedented, right? Again, Julie Phillips joining us here, everybody, in your local, in your hurricane headquarters, also your local election headquarters, but more on that later on WFLA Now. Julie Phillips joining us here, and Ian is also going to be sticking around to answer some questions here, everybody. Again, using the hashtags that you have here on your screen. You can use hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJulie, hashtag HeyIan. I've got my eyes here in the Facebook Live comment section. If you use one of those hashtags, we can bring them up here on screen and pose them to either Julie or Ian. Ian standing by here at the wall. And I'm going to get to the very first comment coming in here, Julie, from Boozy Monroe. Hashtag HeyJulie, will it become stronger by the time it hits Florida?
All right, so right now we have a tropical system over land. So this system will continue to weaken while it's over land, but once it moves out into the Caribbean, that's when we're looking at some of the potential for this to become stronger again. The Caribbean water is still pretty warm, so you have some of that fuel there, and that's what the forecast cone will show you. So Friday is when we may start to see some organization, and from there, we'll probably be able to have a much better idea to let you know of the track of this system. At this point, it's really too early to tell if this system will actually hit Florida, so we can't let you know if it'll be stronger before it hits Florida until we know what the impacts would be here locally. So yes, once it does move back out over water, we are expecting this to likely, it looks like at this point, to become a tropical storm again. Then it depends on if we see some interaction with Cuba. How much does that affect the system? And then as the system then does move north, it may stay in the Gulf, it may stay east of Florida, it may impact the peninsula. But right now, again, we're looking at a tropical storm strength likely as we head into the weekend. And we'll go from there.
So much uncertainty with this. I'm seeing some of the questions that are starting to come in here, everybody on Facebook Live. And again, as a reminder, there is so much uncertainty surrounding the storm. So there's only so much that we can project and really talk about with any degree of certainty at all. I want to bring in Ian Oliver here to answer this next one from Lance Koski, hashtag HeyJulie. What category storm do you think that this will become? And the track, Ian, as of right now, still has this as a tropical storm. But actually, we're gonna do 2 for 1 here, Ian. I'm gonna throw you David Fassel's comment here because the two relate together. And David Fassel asking hashtag HeyJB, what are the water temperatures from the south to our area? Because these two questions, they play hand in hand. The water temperatures there in the Caribbean, in the Gulf itself, and how much the storm is expected to intensify over the next several days.
Yeah, the water temperature question is an excellent one because that does have a lot to do with the intensity. We saw what happened with this system, just exploded off the coast of Nicaragua into a Category 4 hurricane, one of the fastest rapid intensifications we've seen with a tropical system. So that was something pretty scary to see as this system approached the Nicaraguan coastline. The reason for that, though, was that it was in a favorable atmospheric environment and it was sitting over very warm sea surface temperatures, mid-80s in those areas. Forecast track as we move up to the north, its temperatures more around 80 to 81 degrees. The shelf waters, the shallower waters near the coast, those have cooled considerably. We had this cold front come through Tampa, St. Pete Pier. It's actually at 74 degrees this morning, down from 81 or so last week. So that was a significant cool down with those waters. But generally speaking, these waters here in the Gulf, down into the Straits of Florida, southwestern Atlantic, still around 80 degrees. And that's water temperatures that sustain tropical systems, but not water temperatures like the mid-80s that are going to promote explosive intensification of a system. So there's still a wide variety of intensities with this, likely from a higher end tropical storm. Maybe some of these solutions that escape some of the shelf waters, if it could emerge into the more central Gulf of Mexico, we could perhaps be talking about Category 1 hurricane strength. A lot of uncertainty with this at this point, how much land interaction takes place. what does this thing even look like when it reemerges into the northwestern Caribbean? How quickly will it be able to get its act together before it has to deal with more land interaction with Cuba? So that's the big question mark at this point. And as Julie mentioned, it's really going to be on Friday when we get a better look at this system back over water that's going to answer a lot of those questions. So this edition of Tracking the Tropics isn't really on to tell you to expect impacts. It's an episode to tell you that we need to watch the system as we move on through the next several days.
Ian Oliver standing by here with the very latest on Tropical Storm Eta. Hey, Julie, do you like dad jokes? You a fan of dad jokes?
Good one for us?
It was just only a matter of time before this one came in here in the Facebook Live comment section. Lance Koski, hashtag Hey Julie, what is the ETA of Eta? It was just, again, a matter of time before we got to this one.
I should have seen that one coming.
Yeah, what do we say here for Lance as far as when we could start to feel some of the impacts from Eta, if it does, in fact, impact South Florida or even closer to us here in the Tampa Bay area?
Right. So like we've been mentioning, Friday is when the system moves back out over the Caribbean. And then we're looking at any potential development near Cuba this weekend. So we're talking if there is any Florida impacts, talking about early this week, probably in the Monday, Tuesday timeframe. At this point, obviously depends on the track of the system, how quickly it's moving, how it's developed. But I would say really not until early next week. So we are still a ways away, and with a lot that can happen in that time frame. That's why Ian was emphasizing that we are in the watching and waiting period to see if there'll be any U.S. impacts even at this point.
Next comment we have coming in here is from Maria Baston. Let's get to this comment here. Hashtag KJB. With the cold fronts we have, wouldn't that help us a little? And Ian, you're in the Tampa Bay area. We finally had some cooler weather these last several days. So I think that's what Mary is talking about here, whether or not the cold fronts are going to help with the storm or impact Eta at all.
Yeah, it's a great question too, JB. Thanks for asking that one, Mary. It's really kind of a political and a meteorological answer to that one. I know too early to call, too early to say. No one wants to hear those phrases anymore. But the answer is yes and no, to be honest, as far as cold fronts go this time of the year. What I mentioned, as that cool air moves in, some of the shelf waters, Gulf temperatures start to come down from those mid-season peak temperatures when we're in the mid-80s and we're looking at bathwater, upper 80s even. That can promote some of that explosive development of tropical systems. This is not that. So we have had, not really through much of October, but we had that little stretch late September into early October, warm October, record October for Tampa, but then we had that cold front that came on through. So we have seen some significant cooling of the sea surface temperatures in the Gulf. So that does help bring down basically the top edge of the intensities with this system. But as we mentioned, there's still 80, 81, 82 degrees. If the system could get its act together here, that's still warm enough for it to sustain itself. So that's the first thing with cold fronts, how they can help cooling down the sea surface temperatures. The issue for us, and it's why we talk about, specifically if you're watching here in Tampa, the Tampa Bay area's vulnerability to late season systems is that you do get cold fronts that sweep into the Gulf of Mexico. So what you saw early in the season, unfortunately for the folks across the northern Gulf Coast, it was just incessant. 5 tropical landfalls just in Louisiana. Usually a system gets into the Gulf and it's just allowed freely because of the subtropical ridge, that Bermuda area of high pressure, to just keep on moving to the north. But late season, sometimes we have cold front sweeping into the Gulf of Mexico, and that can act to kind of give a tropical system a kick off to the east, help turn the system off to the east, and that sometimes can be what pushes a system into the Tampa Bay area. That would be where our vulnerability comes into tropical systems, especially late season. Sometimes we see that happen early season with kind of hybrid subtropical systems. So that is a bit of an issue. And because of the timing still being in question here, we need to know the major players. Right now there's an upper level low, a trough that's going to help at first energize the system and then push it to the north and east. But from here, this is essentially where the uncertainty comes in with the eventual evolution of the system, the land interaction with Cuba. Where it goes from there is a question mark at this point, and one that we're going to be nailing down next few days, JB.
Ian, I think I have another couple of questions that are going to tie exactly into what you were just talking about here with the movement of this system, but I want to just let folks know we only have another 2 to 3 minutes here on Tracking the Tropics, so this is the last call for any of the questions that you might have here in the Facebook Live comment section. I have the Facebook Live comment section pulled up right here in front of me. If you use hashtag HeyJB, hashtag Hey Ian, or hashtag Hey Julie, we'll be getting to some of your comments here from Facebook Live talking about Eta and, of course, just the 2020 hurricane season. Like this one here from Ashley Renee. Ricky, hashtag Hey Julie, is there anything to push it east into us as they typically go north the stronger that they get? And then, Ian, I'm going to ask you to follow up here based on what you're just talking about. Also from Rihanna here, hashtag Hey Ian, hashtag Hey JB. What is pushing the system and causing it to make that easterly turn towards us in Florida?
Am I taking this one or Julie? Okay, all
Which
right.
one?
Yeah, Julie, you want to hop in here first?
Sure,
Yeah, okay.
I can start. What Ian was saying was we have to watch for is what can turn these systems east is going to be troughs or cold front that they come sweep in this time of the year. Typically, like he was saying, in August, we don't really get cold fronts into Florida. It's usually not until October, and October can be a very active month for Florida because we can get these systems that will then move in, and that's when we could see the system potentially then just kind of take that sharp right into the west coast of Florida, depending on the timing of the front. So we watch systems very closely when they're in the Gulf because they can make that sharp turn towards us. So that's, of course, something we look for if the system were to move in the Gulf would be timings of any cold fronts at this point. We did just have a nice strong cold front that rolled through earlier this week. It looks like in the long term, we don't really have much in terms of fronts that we're looking at in the next several days heading our way. So nothing like that, in the short term that we're looking at. But, for right now, the system will probably, continue once it does make that curve into the Caribbean. We'll have to look for, if this makes it into the Gulf, if there would be anything that could potentially shove it east.
And we're only going to have time for one more question here, everybody. And I'm going to bring both of you up here, Ian and Julie, to kind of talk about this next one here because it's a pretty in-depth question here from Ava, hashtag HeyJB. NHC is predicting around 6 to 8 inches of precipitation for the Treasure Coast from Thursday through to Tuesday. What say you? For myself, it isn't wind speed, rip currents, and the like. It's the rain. What are you seeing from your data analysis? So I'll bring you guys both up here on screen, and whoever wants to weigh in here on Ava's commenting about the Treasure Coast there.
I guess I can start it. Right now it's still really early to tell you. I think really precise impacts, even as much as rainfall, is really hard to determine because it's going to be a huge impact on the track of this system, which we know from past systems. So I think it's too early to really say what impacts you could have in the Treasure Coast yet. There is that potential for more rain than we would typically see because of a potential system around, but we'll have to wait and see. And then also in terms of any intensity, I do think you're right with the system. Just historically, we're getting into mid-November. This time of year, we're not really anticipating, rapid intensification just as things start to ease up. So it would typically be something that would be more of a rainmaker, and that would probably be the biggest of the threats, or maybe isolated spin-ups, tornadoes, that type of thing.
Yeah, as far as exact tallies, like 6 to 8 inches, it is way too early to say. What I would say, though, is something that we are more sure about at this point is there is that general track somewhere in the vicinity of South Florida. It's a tropical system. You see where it's coming from, the northwestern Caribbean. There's a lot of moisture associated with it. So these rain chances are definitely on the way up by the end of the weekend, and then really looked like Monday morning for South Florida. For us, likely a little bit later than that. The tropical moisture will be in the neighborhood. The exact track where the most intense part of the system is going to dictate who sees those big-time rainfall tallies. But some rain, and we can use it. November for Tampa, that's our driest month of the year. 2020 has been a dry year, so really kind of the best-case scenario here. We say that, rain with a name, a low-end tropical system, a tropical depression that produces, of course, we don't want any flash flooding, but if we could get a nice soaking out of this in November, that's always a bonus for us heading into the dry season.
We're going to keep a very, very close eye on Eta and its ETA for everybody making the dad joke there in the Facebook Live comment section. We appreciate everybody being here with us on our regular edition of Tracking the Tropics. As a reminder, Wednesdays, 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central. Whether or not there is tropical activity, we're here talking about the tropics so that you and your family can be educated and aware as to what's going on out there. And if there isn't anything going on out there, it's meteorologists like Julie Phillips, like Ian Oliver, here to educate you on what to expect and how tropical storms and hurricanes develop. So we're going to be back here with additional episodes on Eta as it gets a little bit closer, of course, to the state of Florida. We're going to be tracking it very closely here in your hurricane headquarters. So be on the lookout for additional episodes and live streams here of Tracking the Tropics. But again, as a reminder, every Wednesday during hurricane season, 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central, we're here to talk about tropical development. So for meteorologist Julie Phillips, Ian Oliver, I'm JB Buno. Thanks so much for being with us here on this edition of Tracking the Tropics, and we'll continue to track Eta to provide you with the very latest. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.